a crown of splendor in the Lord's hand, a royal diadem in the hand of your God. No longer will they call you deserted or name your land desolate, but you will be called Hephzibah and your land Beulah. For the Lord will take delight in you, and your land will be married. Isaiah 62:3. And I hope that on your own private time, you will really go back over and read those verses over again. That is Isaiah 62. I started at verse 3 and I read through verse 4. Because you know what? God has given you a new name. God has given me a new name. God has given us a new name. But see, you keep answering to the old one, right? But God has given you a new name, a pleasant name. So it's not that God is not wanting to rejoice in you, but it's that you are not walking in you. See, because when God gives you a new name, he calls you by that name. And if you haven't been in fellowship with God, and if you have not been talking to God and praying to God, you may not even be aware that he's giving you a new name. But I'm willing to bet the people that I'm talking to today are quite aware that God is calling you by a new name. And today it's time to answer by that new name and walk in your promise. And I get it. It is an adjustment, right? Because what about, that's like in the natural, right? If someone were to change our name, right? And just start calling us by a whole new name. And we're like, what are you calling me? What's going on? And you're trying to familiarize with yourself, not only with the name, but what the name means, right? Because as we read on, it says, as a young man marries a young woman, so will your builder marry you. As a bridegroom rejoices over his bride, so will your God rejoice over you. So it's not that God does not want to rejoice over you. God always wants to rejoice over you. He created you, but it's just that you are not walking in you, right? And so when he's calling you by your new name, a pleasant name, right? When I looked up my Matthew Henry's commentary, it noted a pleasant name, right? Not a name of disdain, right? He's renamed you a pleasant name, right? And so you need to be aware of that name, and not just be aware of what that name is, but be aware of what that name represents, right? How it represents God, how it represents you in the kingdom of God. And so we need to become reacquainted with ourselves. And so I just came on here today to tell you that allow God to reacquaint you with yourself, right? For so long, we have been called by other names, right? Not only the name that our parents have given us, but we've been called other names that people have placed on us. And we're so used to being called by those names so often that we begin to carry on the meaning of those names because we've been allowing ourselves to be identified by others instead of by God. We've been allowing ourselves to be identified by our own selves, right? And sometimes we don't even truly know ourselves, especially if we're not walking with God, if we're not talking to God, if we're not in relationship with him, if we're not prayerful to him. We don't even really realize who we are, right? The fullness of who we are. And that's something that we're going to constantly learn every day. We're going to constantly learn more and more about ourselves as God reveals us to ourselves. And so I just wanted to come on here for a moment, take a moment out and tell you, allow God to reintroduce you the way he sees you, right? Allow God to call you by the name that he has given you, a new name. It mentions a royal diadem. That is a fancy headpiece. It's a crown. So God has crowned you with a new name. So wear it. God bless.